Hello and welcome to the intersection of money and politics. You're watching Political Capital. I'm Karabole Tlatla. It is a busy month of April for the African National Congress. South Africa's ruling party is preparing funeral plans for its struggle stalwart Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, but they are also preparing for Africa's trial of the century. Former ANC President Jacob Zuma stands trial tomorrow in Durban as he hears more about his 16 charges of corruption, racketeering, money laundering and fraud. It has been a torrid year in South African politics that has led us to this. But how are the newspapers preparing to cover this momentous trial?
The unraveling of the Jacob Zuma story has taken just over a year. What a torrid year it has been. It was just before midnight on March the 30th, 2017, that the then President Zuma fired Pravin Gordhan as finance minister. The currency dived and the market crashed ahead of downgrades of the economy to junk. This period was overseen by the relative finance ministerial novice Malusi Gigaba, who lasted less than a year himself. The turmoil in the finance ministry led to nationwide protests calling for Zuma to go that appeared to unite the races and the political factions. More than 100,000 people marched on the union buildings in Pretoria in April. In December, Zuma's grip on power loosened when his faction, led by his former wife and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, lost out in the ANC leadership stakes.
But just how did we get here? South Africa's last year has been characterized by marches, court cases, and political backstabbings.
The controversy over the infamous South African arms deal stretches back nearly 20 years. The deal was to buy fighter aircraft, helicopters, submarines and naval corvettes for the armed forces. In November 1998, Cabinet approves the arms deal, which carries a price tag of 30 billion rand. On that day, Jacob Zuma, Shabir Sheikh and arms dealer Thompson CSF meet. September 1999, Patricia de Lille presents Parliament with a dossier compiled by so-called concerned ANC MPs, which contains allegations of extensive corruption in the arms deal. Negotiations and investigations begin. March 2000, Zuma, Sheikh and Alan Tithard of Tint allegedly meet to discuss paying Zuma R500,000 a year in return for protection against a probe into Thompson. June 2003. In the UK, it is revealed that BAE, British Aerospace, had paid commissions to agents to help secure the deal. October 2004, Shabir Sheikh's trial begins. June 2005, Judge Hilary Squires finds Sheikh guilty. He is jailed for 15 years and his lawyers appeal the sentence. Same month, Zuma is charged with having had a generally corrupt relationship with Sheikh. In August, his house is raided by the Scorpions. September 2006, Zuma's corruption case is struck from the roll. September 2008, the High Court rules corruption charges against Zuma are invalid. April 2009, the acting head of prosecution, Mokotedi Moshe, withdraws charges against Zuma. Then, on March the 16th, 2018, nearly a decade later, this happened.
I would thus like to take the opportunity today to inform the nation of my decision in relation to representations I received from former President Zuma on 31 January 2018 in terms of the provisions of Section 179, subsection 2 of the Constitution to reconsider the decision to indict him on 16 charges of an 18-charge indictment.
What are former President Jacob Zuma's legal options? I spoke to political analyst and author of When Zuma Goes. Ralph Mateja told me about President Jacob Zuma's legal troubles.
the history of the ANC is yet to be written. It's not yet written altogether, because in President Jacob Zuma, you do have someone who has got an incredible reputation, having served in exile, having coordinated some of the complex project initiative against apartheid government. But President Jacob Zuma's experience in a democratic South Africa is that which shows that a commitment against apartheid does not necessarily mean one will be in a position to play a positive role when it comes to democratic consolidation. So President Jacob Zuma is going on trial. You cannot put President Jacob Zuma on trial without putting the ANC on trial. And for that matter, you are going to have to ask what went wrong with the ANC. But in the very same week, as you correctly point out, you are talking about another stalwart of the ANC, Winnie Mandela, having passed. And what the ANC wants, it's a good story to tell out of Winnie Mandela's passing, the glorious history she has. And also they are wishing, they will try by all means to avoid any controversies around that. But unfortunately, they are stuck with President Jacob Zuma, who continues to contribute to the writing of the ANC's history. They cannot ignore that. They will try by all means to say that Zuma's situation might be a footnote of the ANC's history. But that might not be the case. It actually might be the core. They cannot avoid having to respond and narrate as to how does Zuma fit in the history of the ANC. And if you contrast it with Winnie Mandela, how do you put the same on the same pedestal, the two on the same pedestal?
You give a very interesting take, and I appreciate that. The fact that on the one hand, you have the ANC trying to come out with a good news story out of Winnie Mandela, but that Zuma still remains for as much as he may be a former president. Could his defense be the fact that, as it has been purported in the past, that he thinks that he was doing this for black economic empowerment? I mean, does it hold water? I mean, legally, I'm not even sure if it has any foot to stand on.
Well, he's right, but for wrong reasons. You know, because if you look at corruption in South Africa, you look at the manner in which the state-owned entities had been captured, where tenders have been allocated preferentially to certain individuals. It is the ANC that began the whole thing. It is the ANC that put together Chancellor House so that they can get the tenders. In Eskom, they've done it. The Hitachi company has been fined in the United States due to its relationship with the ANC in relation to the Eskom tenders. So it cannot distance itself from that. The ANC cannot distance itself from having opened a path of corruption. That is why the likes of Zuma are going to come out and say that what we were doing was just an extension of the ANC's redistribution policy of making sure that black companies do benefit out of that. And if Mr. Zuma sticks to this kind of a defense, you're going to have to evaluate the merit of some of the black economic empowerment transactions. No doubt the whole policy will be brought to court, will be evaluated in court. Unfortunately, for a man who is really struggling to hold up, for a man who has got no other kind of a defense. Remember, the only thing remaining for Mr. Zuma now is only if he gets given a pardon, if he's found guilty. But at this point, he's going to say all that needs to be said. And is there truth to the idea that indeed some of the transactions involve black economic empowerment? I would say it's not entirely false.
All right, that's one form of defense. But to tell the truth, Jacob Zuma finds himself alone, as he did back in 2006 after he had been suspended. Jacob Zuma finds himself in a position where he will need friends outside of the court, and I mean groups larger than just the Women's League. So the voices of his usual supporters, the Women's League, the Youth League, the Veterans League, where are those voices? And are they being stifled by a Ramaphosa presidency?
I do think that there's been a realignment away from Zuma. As much as there are still those who are interested in his project within the ANC, they do not constitute a significant majority. But within the party doesn't mean they cannot cause trouble for the new leadership of the party. So what happened to the old allies of President Jacob Zuma? We are talking about Julius Malema, used to be. We are talking about Mr. Vavi. It's all gone. They are no longer part of Mr. Zuma's project. The SACP's Dlamini-Zuma as well. They had stood by him when he went to court initially on this matter. But things have changed to a point where he has become a liability to those people. And I do think that now all he has to do is to hold on to whatever support that comes, either snippets of support from the Women's League and the ANC Youth League and so forth. But we shouldn't underestimate the position where he finds himself in. The reality is that regarding the arms deal and everything else that has happened, if there is anybody who knows where the bodies are buried, it is Mr. Jacob Zuma. And the reality is that Mr. Zuma is the one who came up with a commission of inquiry that looked like it was deliberate whitewash. You should ask yourself, who did he protect and who is he willing to speak against in his trial?
There had always been this threat that Jacob Zuma will spill ANC secrets. I mean, Jacob Zuma's been in the ANC NEC since 1978. That makes him one of the longest serving members of the African National Congress. And as you say rightly, he knows where a lot of bodies are buried. Do you think he's looking on these charges that he is facing right now with disdain? That, of course, you know, I know more things than this. Why am I being charged for these puny little charges? I
mean, look, this thing is going for a pardon. If Zuma is found guilty, this thing is going for a pardon, because a pardon is the best deal that the ANC-led government can give him, and I don't think anyone can challenge it in court. But I think the promise of a pardon, the possibility of the ANC finding a way to protect him somehow, I think that will incentivize him not to speak too much. Because remember, of course, the ANC, he will speak against the ANC, but the ANC is a conglomeration of individuals. He will speak about what individuals have been up to. And I think we need to note as well, Zuma is very loyal to the ANC. Even if he has been implicated in corruption, he has always maintained his loyalty to the ANC. And I think if he has to choose between protecting the organization and maybe spilling the beans on some of the individuals, he will most likely speak about the individuals instead of implicating the organization as an institution. Of course, it is in the court of law. You don't say stories as you want them. You get interrogated to a point where you end up at a conclusion you didn't want to. So it's going to be quite tough for him. But we shouldn't underestimate what he's capable of. He can actually try to spill on individuals while protecting the ANC to a great extent.